perspective will be delivered by Nicole Thomas, who's a healthcare advocacy activist. Nicole, you have a fabulous biography and a fabulous story. I'm going to turn it over to you to share and also to call out our facilitators. Nicole Thomas, thank you for being our closing perspective, and I will turn it to you as our healthcare advocacy activist.
Thank you. I came to be an advocate in healthcare first as a cancer patient when I realized that my recovery and my eventual survival from the cancer had been diagnosed with depended greatly on my becoming an active partner in my health and developing skills to advocate for myself. Then later on in life, when my husband was in late stage cancer, he was supremely incapacitated, and I became his advocate by accompanying him to all treatments, and I became the voice for him. One of those reasons is my husband being an African American, he was very leery of the medical system. And it's then become my mission to work with people of color in advocating for them in their care, and especially when they're battling cancer. I have accompanied people. I have asked the questions for them. I have empowered them to ask the questions they needed to do and to take charge of their treatments and make sure that they are being heard throughout the whole process. I've also, in the last 10 years, I've been working with racial justice groups, facilitating groups for conversation and empowering individuals to own their own power and advocate for themselves, but also for us to listen better to one another and to find solutions as a group. So I have a very holistic approach to advocacy. I believe in the spiritual aspect of advocacy also, and to trying to bring some kindness and compassion through the advocacy process. When I facilitate dialogue groups, I try to make sure that everyone is being heard, but also that their feelings are validated, that they are being heard clearly, compassionately, and I am with no judgment. That is not always an easy area to navigate. But I have learned through experience and through life as I get older that we can support people in small and big ways in helping them learn to advocate for themselves. I think the most important ingredient is presence in their life. Presence as a support system, presence in hearing them out and being available to them when they need it. And I also find that advocacy starts in small acts of small gestures, often one-on-one, being attentive to each other's needs. And I feel that that can affect the world in very big ways. In the small group that I was in, Jeff mentioned the sharing of power. And I thought that we often think, as advocacy is overpowering the other, acquiring the power, and making the other weaker. Well, I don't feel of it that way at all. I think of it as owning your power, standing in your power, and speaking up for yourself, but also to acknowledge the humanity of the other person. And I find that has worked well in the work that I have done. It is not easy. It's sometimes hard to believe, but it's all about one gesture, one word, one moment at a time. And I guess the overall theory of my work is kindness is easier than hate. I think you harness your energy to use in more creative ways into your work, and to really open yourself up to what you can learn from others, and to not look the other as separate from you, but to be linked as a person that is linked to your life in one form or another, because we're all existing here on this earth together.
Thank you, Nicole. Were you, sorry, did I interrupt you?
Nope, nope.
Okay. Did you want to share your poem?
Well, maybe I want to share something about the transportation. Me, I was working as an agent for the government.
Patrizio, please. We have our speaker here. Okay. Nicole.
Okay, so as I was working.
Sorry, Nicole, you were going to share your poem.
I'm a good listener, so.
Excuse me.
I have used a lot of different sets of beliefs in my life. There is, from my Native grandmother, Native beliefs in community and sharing. And also lately, a friend of mine has been sort of sending me sent me a book on Celtic wisdom. And I have found there's such commonality between Native American, Native wisdom, and Celtic wisdom. We share a tremendous reverence for the earth and for other human beings. And so I'd like to leave you with this small poem, and it's called A Friendship Blessing. May you be blessed with good friends. May you learn to be a good friend to yourself. May you be able to journey to that place in your soul where there is great love, warmth, feeling, and forgiveness. May this change you. May it transfigure that which is negative, distant, and cold in you. May you be brought in to the real passion, kinship, and affinity of belonging. May you treasure your friends. May you be good to them. May you be there for them. May they bring you all the blessings, challenges, truth, and light that you need for your journey. May you never be isolated. May you always be in the gentle nest of belonging with your Anamkara. Anamkara means a friend of soul. It's a soul friend. It's a very deep friendship. May I leave you with that.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you all for this. Nicole, we're now going to turn over to the facilitators for their recap. I will call on them today. So Natalie Borneo.
Thank you, Nalini. And thank you so much, Nicole. That was truly great to hear just how important advocacy is, and starting with that voice of compassion and passion. So in our group, we had individuals from Montreal, from Philadelphia, and from New York, all bringing different perspectives in terms of advocacy. So in the first, for the first share out, our contributor said, you know, I work in safety and security. And what I find that I do mostly, although I am in charge of individuals who are almost criminal in terms of their behavior, my role is really to encourage them to change. And so sometimes it is that empathetic lead that we have in being someone's champion when they may not feel like they have any champion at all. And so that support is very encouraging. Then we had someone else who talked about the fact that recent experiences with advocacy have really given her a new sense of energy around how to really use her privilege to advocate. So her organization recently, and when I say recently, it is following the events of the summer. And yes, George Floyd's murder was the trigger for a lot of discussion in the organization about changing and creating a diversity and inclusion council. And the council is comprised of different individuals, bringing in someone who's African American and only with the organization maybe 6 months, someone else who may identify as LGBTQ, and a older, a white gentleman, and herself. And, although they had made great strides, when they were ready to make their first report to the organization of well over 200 people, the gentleman, the white male, decided that he should be the one making the first report from this diversity and inclusion council. And she felt that that was wrong. And her initial thought was, I'm just a normal white woman. How am I going to make a difference here? And so just following up on some of what Fotini shared, taking a step back and pausing, she actually sought good counsel and advice and shared with someone the discomfort that she was feeling. And she was encouraged to use her privilege to push for change, not acting on wild emotion, but taking a step back and really writing the language in the way that showed that the work that we're doing, it's so important that it be shared by people who don't look like me and don't look like you. And at the end of the day, the report was given by the other individuals who would not be the ones that would typically be addressing the organization. And it was just very empowering. So they've been uplifted as a committee and the work goes forward, which is so important because if they had actually given or allowed this individual to make the report in the way that he wanted to, the work and the impact of diversity and inclusion would have been lost. And so what she did was more heroic. She actually found the courage, which is one of the things that we've learned. I'll talk about the 3 things that we've learned about advocacy. Our other contributor had an experience as a lifelong teacher working in community college, and despite having worked over 20 years and being a beloved, firm, but effective and loved teacher, found herself being attacked and being labeled for being hostile to a certain group of students. And even in her quest to prove that this was not so, she did seek out advice from others. And even those who she trusted and loved said, well, maybe, it's going to be okay. You shouldn't do anything. It'll play itself out. But her internal thermostat said, this is not right. And I cannot allow this to happen the way it's happening because I can see the discrepancies. I can see that the things that are written are not matching what the things that are being said. And she too found the courage to engage, step back, and write about what she was feeling and what was wrong. And she persevered, which was great. And so what we have learned when you look at the word advocacy, right? Bring someone with you. You cannot do this alone. It means you should not be alone. And so if you feel like something is wrong, your first thing is to take a step back and figure out who you need to add. Do I need to get validation? Do I need support? So add. And then I've turned advocacy into vocation, which actually means a strong feeling of suitability. So you're feeling very strongly about something. You're bringing somebody along to help you validate. But in this world of advocacy, right, we figured out it starts with empathy, right? That compassion, that feeling. But also you need self-love. You need to be confident in yourself, appreciate yourself, and feel like there is worth. Communicating your value and your worth is important because you love yourself. And so we've learned that empathy, self-love, self-confidence, adding and bringing someone along, because you can't go it alone, will help you to move forward. Finding the courage to overcome the fear of moving forward, because that gut feeling that you're feeling, one of our speakers said, is experiential truth. You can't prove it, but you know deep down inside something is wrong. And so you give space and voice to self, and everyone really needs to understand how important it is to start with self first, but don't go it alone. Develop the relationship that you need to help you and support you in moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie Borneo. So powerful and beautiful stories. Thank you. We'll now go over to Mrs. Faley.
I think this is a case where we're really building something very powerful here. The most important thing that's coming out is the importance of personal power and support and the development of community. And it begins with that development of personal power. And in our group, it was the fact that scientists have collaboration, and they go into their job with that idea because they have a common goal and a common mission. And I think that's important too with groups, and just deciding on what the common goal is and what the mission is. The advocate creates a sense of community through shared power. It involves speaking for yourself, but also coming up, being very well prepared with questions that you need to use as a guide. The ability to question. Key to all of this, and then I came into the group today, was that not being angry, that breaks down everything. It gives yourself some sense of power, and then you realize when you step away that you really have nothing. But then there are difficult positions that people are put into, particularly was mentioned in education, when people are adjunct professors. And here they have the position of professor, they are very educated, but an adjunct means no office, no space. And when you don't have a space and you're not connected with other people, you just go in, teach the class and move out, that sense of community isn't there. And so in one sense, your power is taken away. So then there's a question about what needs to be done. And I think that's very valid in education, that office space and shared office space makes a difference in the feeling of personal power within the community of education. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Faley. Some applause for you. Dr. Clifton?
Thank you for listening to Nicole and the facilitators preceding me. It seems like our group personally carried out a lot of what the facilitators were talking about from their other groups. We were genuinely advocates to each other, sharing from our own inner voices, which is, and people were adding their personal experiences to answer some questions and advise people. So it was very very moving. One of the contributors in the group was sharing personal experiences, how he could advocate for himself, giving two stories where he was discriminated against, but he was able to calmly demonstrate that he was entitled to this service. And he was able to display it in a kind of very moving way, but without that anger, and just putting it forward. He was certainly aware enough what he could back it up with, but he didn't need to back it up with in a power sense. And it was quite moving that he shared that with us. He also shared a story of one of his mentors from a while back, that he was always teaching him, and he's obviously learned the lesson, that we have to first use our ears to understand the person more so than our mouth to try to convince the person. So the first step is to understand, and that's the empathy aspect. So that was quite moving, and we had people maybe in all different parts of the journey of our lives. There was a young woman who was just finishing her bachelor's degree, and she's full of openness, articulate, caring, and she's yet to face some of these things, but she's anticipating it in pursuing jobs after finishing her undergraduate degree. And people were very happy to, out of a genuine way, to offer some advice about the interviewing process and being self-advocating. Another member of our group asked some questions about how we can add to our stance, and how to bring people into and support groups that can help us. And Fotina, our speaker, opening speaker, gave the advice that, that you can plant seeds of advocacy with different groups you speak to, with different friends, different things, so that you can build up almost a file of different advocates that you can bring to your side. And then there was another important question that came up of how, like talking about women's rights, how do we not appear as overly aggressive rather than forthright and caring. And Patina pointed out and shared that that's one of the things that she's found extremely valuable, is when in an advocacy situation, in a situation of trying to help people understand, that questioning becomes a very important thing, where somebody that we might be somewhat oppositional to, we ask them of their advice. And by putting the questions in, we're steering the conversation, but we're also giving them a certain level of respect that, and I find in my own life that people, if you ask them a question, they're very, they're usually very forthcoming about it. And so there was just a general sense of sharing personal experiences of advocacy, and maybe, tactics is maybe, tactics with presence and caring is a very valuable lesson that was shared in this group. So it was a pleasure being in it. I think it's an extremely important topic, and it was a pleasure being there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clifton. We'll now hear from Malia.
Thank you. And I got cut off earlier, but thank you to my group. Again, we had such a great conversation, and and then listening to all the report arts just reminded me why I love coming here so much, just being inspired, hearing other people's stories to open my mind. Is just I feel let's carpe diem, let's carpe this world. I love it. And let me share with you guys some of these amazing stories. So we had one group member who shared her experience. She got a dream job, right? And she was like, this is amazing. And she noticed that it was a toxic environment, that it was a woman-owned business, a small boutique agency, and the woman was toxic with her employees. And she was just kept trying to work to this high standard, her own standard, right? And just kept going and plugging away. And then a few months or a year into it, she found out from another connection in the company that the woman had hired somebody and asked her to train her to replace her. So how terrible is that, right? And so it's like, that's a blow. And even still, she still continued to try to fight for her position and advocate for herself. And then over time, it just really got into a lot of arguments. It was the woman and her husband who owned the boutique just kind of berating her. And then she had to stop and think to herself, like, what am I fighting for? Right? What am I fighting for? Know your worth, and believe in yourself. And like, she really realized that, when you're looking for a place to work or anyone to be around, examine your core values and how it compares to theirs. And another really interesting takeaway was that she said there's no HR. It's a small company, no HR. And so while she reached out to friends who are HR or lawyers, really it was that there was no system there to help her. There's no third party that she didn't know that she needed to have there. And it kind of made me think about, just in our world in social justice, when we need to advocate, is there a system there that's supposed to help us? And most companies are supposed to have that system, but when it's gone, what does that say about our worth, right? And who's going to help us? It's like we're all alone. Then we had another great share from another team member who was in a similar situation. And 6 months, she said, what, 6 months ago, more now, that, it was in the height of social justice when George Floyd was killed, and the company that she was working for gave no information, had no statement to say that they're anti-racist and they're going to stand against this type of action. And she's herself is mixed race, and also but most people wouldn't know. And so it really affected her, and she wanted to stand up for herself and for the one other person who was a person of color in this agency. And so what she did was pen a 2-page letter to the executive, and nothing. And so she refused. She had her own protest. She refused to participate in any Zoom meetings until they released a statement. And that, wasn't received well from HR. There was backlash. They had one Zoom session where they said something and maybe released one thing. So she felt like she stood up for herself, and maybe not the best thing happened, but something happened. And then she also examined it, and she was like, you know what? Not for me, adios. And she left. And we had a gentleman in our group, of all women and a gentleman. And he said, I asked him for his opinion, and it was interesting because he said he hoped to hear more from us, being that it's Women's History Month, and I appreciated that. And he gave his interesting perspective on how he advocates for himself, is that he puts himself into a position to make the change. He goes for that position of power. He is so comfortable. He creates his own space of comfort for himself and doesn't run from a challenge. And so if people are challenging him, he's going to tackle it head on, and he's going to change their belief systems, and he's going to write it out. And he asked, what would a woman's experience be? Because he experiences it as a man, as a Black man. And so, he also has a lot of challenges that come with that, but he's facing it straight on. And our takeaway was, well, it is different from a man, because you can kind of stand up and be aggressive. We're kind of taught like it's not really right to challenge that, to be aggressive. We're received differently. We're expected to receive differently. And so we as women I think most time we pivot well, right? We see something, we pivot well. We try to find our tribe, and we're like, we don't want to deal with that. And what was another fun thing was, went back, we had the first share, she commented and she said, well, yeah, how was I supposed to deal with two aggressive people coming down on me? And I'm trying to advocate back and nothing to do because it's not illegal to be an asshole. So, and so in society, women were not really trained to be that way back. And I will just say in terms of advocacy, as I listen to everyone, I really believe in like a ripple effect. And all the times that you have advocated for yourself, you have changed someone else's mind or you have planted a seed. And I would just like to thank everyone for advocating for themselves, because as you create that ripple effect, you will hopefully, that person will treat somebody else differently and remember that. So thank you guys all. And that was my share. And thank you again to my group.
Thank you so much, Malia. Applause for you as well. With that, we're actually now